Have you ever taken a step back, had a look at how your teams are delivering software, and just feel like things just aren't right? They're not flowing the way that they should be. Things could be a little bit smoother. If you have found that, you're most likely starting to see the beginning of software sprawl taking hold in your environment. I'm Andrew Boyardi, not Taylor Swift. I'm a DevOps evangelist and from Atlassian, and today I'm going to be talking to you about software sprawl. I know what you're thinking. What is software sprawl? How do I know if I've got it? What do I do if I do? Well, you're in luck because that's what we're going to go through today. But before we get into all that, let's have a look at some context and see how we got here. So we've seen a rapid shift across the industry towards a loosely coupled architecture. So the power of loosely coupled, distributed, autonomous teams breaking down software applications from monoliths into components like microservices. And there's a good reason for that shift as well. As you know, with a loosely coupled architecture, it's much easier to scale performance and resilience, and there's a much less time to deliver code to production, so it's much faster to develop software. From the team perspective, there's some great benefits as well. So teams who work in autonomous and distributed teams report higher levels of team happiness. And the people inside those teams report much higher levels of engagement. So of course, when you get both of those things put together, you get a higher or much more productive team. But that all sounds great, but with new ways of working come some new challenges. The latest State of DevOps report shows that there's a reduction in high-performing software delivery teams by around 29%. Now, how do they assess that? It's pretty common knowledge, but the criteria that they use to determine whether a team is high-performing or not is lead time for changes, mean time to recover from an incident, deployment frequency, and change failure rate. But DevOps is not a new concept. We've been doing this for a while, so you'd be expecting that maturity will be increasing over time rather than seeing a pretty rapid decrease over the last few years. So what's the problem? And you guessed it, it's software sprawl. So one of the factors that reduce the performance of engineering teams is software sprawl. So let's talk about what software sprawl is. Software sprawl occurs in an environment where we see the number of software components rapidly growing. Coupled with that, when you have distributed autonomous teams, those software components are rapidly changing. And so it significantly increases complexity in the environment. So this causes the traditional ways that we used to manage software to start to fail. Let's bring it to life a little bit. Let's talk about modernizing a single app. So when you modernize one app, that could result in hundreds of microservices, which are starting to be changed very frequently by multiple teams. When you expand that out to even a small portfolio, you're talking about thousands of microservices that are frequently changing by distributed autonomous teams. So it's no surprise that traditional ways of running even a small application portfolio are going to start to fail as the complexity grows. The thing is, though, symptoms of software sprawl are really hard to identify. But I'm going to share with you 3 of those today. All right, so we're going to get into the symptoms. The first symptom is multiple post-incident reviews start to call upstream changes as the root cause of an outage or an incident. So what you'll see when this starts to happen is, as we spoke about with software sprawl, you'll start to see the number of software components rapidly starting to increase. You'll see the volume of change, coupled with that, starting to increase very quickly, which is typical in a loosely coupled architecture environment. How it'll feel like the dev collaboration norms are starting to fail and they're no longer scale with the pace and the size of the environment. Let's look at just a small change. So you take one monolithic application and you modernize it. You go from monthly releases to weekly releases. So it's not a big increase. But just doing that could result in 100 more changes per month just for that one single application. So then when you start to look at a whole portfolio, it starts to get obviously more and more change starts to occur. And what you see when that starts to happen, if developer collaboration starts to fail, we start to see more and more incidents starting to happen in production. So what can you do about this symptom? So enabling developer collaboration in a dynamic environment is really the key to starting to solve this problem. Within Atlassian, we do this in 2 ways. The first thing we look at is pre-release collaboration. So getting developers to collaborate before a release occurs. Now we've developed an awesome new application called Compass, and Compass gives the ability for teams or developers to notify dependent or downstream teams that a breaking change is about to happen. The downstream team can acknowledge that this change is about to happen, so now they're informed, and it gives them an opportunity to collaborate before the change occurs. So this obviously is aimed at trying to prevent an incident from occurring. But in a dynamic environment, incidents are going to happen, so we need to be realistic about that. And what's important when an incident happens is the mean time to recover. You obviously want to reduce that. So how do we do that? We enable developer collaboration during an incident. So again, in Compass, we've built an activity feed where you can have a look at all the upstream events that have occurred with all the upstream applications and identify, is there an existing outage? Was there a bad deployment? Is there something going on upstream? And if you do identify that, you can click in, it tells you which team owns it, what's their Slack channel, where's their documentation. It shows you everything you need so that the developers can start to collaborate during an incident. I know, like me, many of you have probably sat in a major incident call. And the first thing that people start to ask is, who's changed something, what's changed? That's a really valid way for when you're talking about a monolithic application, which has a couple of teams that might be updating it every month, and a couple of teams operating the infrastructure. That's a really valid way to get to a root cause. When you're talking about loosely coupled architecture where the issue could be anywhere up and down the stack and is spread across multiple teams, it's unlikely that that's going to get you the answer that you need in a quick enough time frame. The analogy I use with this one is, it's like you've been bitten by an ant and you're going to try and dismantle the anthill to find out which ant bit you. It's unlikely that you're going to get to the answer that you need. All right, so moving on to the next symptom. Busy but unproductive teams. So this is like high output, low objective achievement. So what does that look like? If you went and had a look at one of these teams' Jira project, you'd see a lot of tickets being moved to done, but they're not really moving the needle on meeting their objectives or their OKRs or whatever goals the team have. In a fast-growing, dynamic environment, it's difficult for developers to keep track of who to engage with, either upstream or downstream, across the environment. So what you'll see is things start to slow down. Teams start building wikis about who to engage with for upstream and downstream dependencies, and that starts to give you a little bit of a boost initially. So when teams start documenting, I need to speak with this person, they'll put their name in there, you'll see an initial boost. But as complexity grows, that starts to fail as well. It's also not ideal to have all your teams or all your developers documenting wikis about other people's services. And when that starts to happen, we see team engagement and team happiness start to drop. How it'll feel, and I'm sure all of you have heard this before because I've heard it many times when this starts to happen, developers will say, if you ask them, what's slowing you down in your day-to-day work? They'll say, everything's fine until we need to engage with another team to do something. That's how you know that software sprawl is starting to play a problem because they can no longer track who to engage with and how to engage with them. To bring this to life, a large tech customer or tech company that we regularly engage with, and we're speaking to them about this problem, they shared with us that their developers spend 30% of their time looking for things. So not writing code, not collaborating with other developers, not solving problems, just looking for things. So that's like a day and a half a week per developer looking for things. Massive waste of time. So what can you do about that? One way that we've solved it, again, within Compass, there's a Compass catalog which we've used to solve this. So think of the catalog as a centralized catalog with decentralized management. So if you think about a traditional catalog, it was a centralized catalog with centralized management. How that feels for a team is they need to email someone else or fill in a form and tell them, hey, we've spun up this new microservice, here's all the details about it, some to and fro, and eventually that ends up in a catalog. That just simply does not keep pace with a fast-paced environment. And that's why teams start creating their own wikis to get around that. So decentralizing the catalog makes teams responsible for updating their own service, not other people's. So you document your own service, all the documentation's in there, and it drives a self-serve information culture. So rather than every team's looking for who to engage, they can see who owns a component, what's the health of that component, and how do I speak or how do I engage with the developers who look after it. So this obviously reduces the invisible effort that we see across teams in documenting wikis, and it drives the demand on engagement on demand culture, which helps teams to move independently and obviously increases velocity as we go. All right, the third symptom, governance teams start to become the bottleneck. Now, what's a governance team? I'm talking about teams like change management and cybersecurity. I don't mean to call them out, they're just examples. And I will start by saying those teams are really important. Their goal is to ensure that the organization's standards are met and understood throughout the software delivery cycle. But what we do see is when software sprawl starts to take hold, those teams become less and less effective. So what you'll see when this starts to happen is you'll see that lead time for delivery starts to increase. The governance teams start to feel overwhelmed, and you'll see their backlogs growing out of control. And there's this feeling that we're never going to get through this backlog of stuff we have to look at. How it'll feel to everybody, so to the development teams, to the governance teams, like there is an issue here with how we're communicating and how we're inspecting the standards that we expect to see across our organization. The latest State of DevOps report reported 56% of security processes, 56% of teams feel as though security processes are slowing down development. Now, that might seem like a lot, but you've got to remember there's 44% who don't feel that way. And why don't they feel that way? I think it's because they've come up with a way to have a look at an unintrusive way to report on compliance. So meeting organizational standards is critical, as is enabling delivery velocity. So a great way to do that is through automated scorecards. So again, in Compass, each component has an automated scorecard, which has the organization's expectations embedded into it. In addition to having what the organization expects as a baseline across all of our components, engineering leaders, product leaders, and the squad themselves are able to add any product-specific requirements that they've got into their own scorecard. And that way, teams have a complete view of what's expected of them during the delivery cycle. This enables a few things. So it enables teams to move quickly. They're not getting to the end of their delivery cycle and being told there's some other thing you need to do now and going back and reworking it. It enables governance teams to communicate expectations at scale. And it gives delivery teams the opportunity to meet those during the delivery lifecycle. The other thing it enables is inspection on demand. So rather than every team needing to report to a governance team, hey, here's what we've done, here's where we're at, the governance team can have a look through the transparency that's provided through the system and have a look who's meeting my requirements, who isn't. And for the ones that aren't, they can then engage with those teams and see if they need any additional help, rather than everybody having to go and report unnecessarily. All right. So I want to leave you with a few different things. So there's the three symptoms of software sprawl and how Compass starts to address those. A few things to leave you with. The signs of software sprawl are really hard to identify. You'll notice that those three things seem really disparate. You really need to take a step back, have a look at your environment, and see, are there signs of software sprawl starting to impact our software delivery? New thinking is required on how you address those. Dev collaboration, it needs to be scalable, it needs to be on demand. You need to enable teams to move independently. Self-service through a catalog, moving away from a centrally managed catalog to something that squads and teams can own themselves. And then governance and compliance. How do you meet those standards that maybe regulators or governance teams have and still enable delivery velocity to happen at the same time? And the last thing I'll leave you with is just speak to your teams. I don't think enough people speak to developers and actually ask them, what's slowing you down? What are your pain points? How can we help you to smooth things over? I'd love to continue the conversation with you. We're at the Atlassian booth. Come and see us if you want to talk about Compass or if you want to talk about software sprawl. We'll be there for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was great. Thank you. And Andrew, which